poems are written from personal experience, but this one absolutely is. So this is the old harmonium. So what you do is you pump that. It just makes a really lovely sort of churchy noise. Even though this poem is called Harmonium, and on the surface it seems to be about a harmonium, this harmonium, the actual musical instrument becomes an extended metaphor. It's a poem about memories and remembering my time in the church choir and the fact that my dad was in the church choir as well. Its relevance is to do with, my relationship with my dad. Harmonium. The Farron chaplet was gathering dust in the shadowy porch of Marsden Church, and was due to be bundled off to the skip, or was mine for a song if I wanted it. Sunlight through stained glass, which day to day could beatify saints and raise the dead, had aged the harmonium's softwood case and yellowed the fingernails of its keys. And one of its notes had lost its tongue, and holes were worn in both the treadles where the organist's feet in grey woolen socks and leather-soled shoes had pedalled and pedalled. But its hummed harmonics still struck a chord. For 100 years that organ had stood by the chorister's stalls, where father and son, each in their time, had opened their throats and gilded finches like high notes had streamed out. Through his own blue cloud of tobacco smog, with smoker's fingers and dottled thumbs, he comes to help me cart it away, and we carry it flat, laid on its back. And he, being him, can't help but say that the next box I'll shoulder through this nave will bear the freight of his own dead weight. And I, being me, then mouth in reply some shallow or sorry phrase or word, too starved of breath to make itself heard. One technique that's at work in the poem is that I draw lots of images of beauty, I suppose. The gilded finches, these golden birds. I invoke the saint, the stained glass window, the sun coming through. And also there's something quite comical as well about moments in the poem about the organist sort of pedalling away, and me and my dad must look like two furniture removers there going down the nave. And I think what I'm doing in the poem is setting up this quite sort of morbid and dark remark that my dad's going to make towards the end of the poem. So I'm just doing all that to highlight the contrast. He, being him, can't help but say that the next box I'll shoulder through this nave will bear the freight of his own dead weight. And I, being me, then mouth in reply some shallow or sorry phrase or word, too starved of breath to make itself heard. It's got an elegiac, commemorative feel to it, which I suppose is odd in some ways because my dad's very much alive and kicking. He's a very larger-than-life character, my dad. I think, in some ways, my dad in the poem is quite heroic for being able to say what's on his mind, but he says that as a sort of challenge to me as well, and I can't respond. I'm very sort of weedy and breathless. I think I used the word shallow. So in the end, I think it's about me and my inability to say the necessary thing. In fact, my response is the poem. When you say war poetry these days, people tend to presume that you're talking about the poets of the First World War. They're the last generation of trained writers and trained soldiers. I've never been involved in a war, I'm not a soldier, I'm probably a bit of a coward. So my route then into writing about conflict was to talk to other people about their experiences and to listen to their testimonies.
The manhunt. After the first phase, after passionate nights and intimate days, only then would he let me trace the frozen river which ran through his face. Only then would he let me explore the blown hinge of his lower jaw, and handle and hold the damaged porcelain collarbone, and mind and attend the fractured rudder of shoulder blade, and finger and thumb the parachute silk of his punctured lung. Only then could I bind the struts and climb the rungs of his broken ribs, and feel the hurt of his grazed heart. Skirting along, only then could I picture the scan, the fetus of metal beneath his chest, where the bullet had finally come to rest. Then I widened the search, traced the scarring back to its source, to a sweating, unexploded mine, buried deep in his mind, around which every nerve in his body had tightened and closed. Then, and only then, did I come close.
This poem is written through the experiences of a soldier called Eddie. A bullet had entered the side of his face. The bullet had ricocheted around inside his body. He wanted to talk about these injuries and the way that they damaged his body and damaged his mind. But the poem's actually written from the point of view of Eddie's wife, Laura, and she's trying to find the real nature of him. And she's exploring that by following the course that this bullet has taken through his body.
Only then would he let me trace the frozen river which ran through his face. Only then would he let me explore the blown hinge of his lower jaw, and handle and hold the damaged porcelain collarbone.
A lot of the imagery in the poem and the language in the poem is borrowed from military vocabulary. A lot of sort of military ideas and words become metaphors for things going on in the body and also things going on in the mind.
Only then could I bind the struts and climb the rungs of his broken ribs, and feel the hurt of his grazed heart. Skirting along, only then could I picture the scan, the fetus of metal beneath his chest, where the bullet had finally come to rest.
I use the word fetus, which I think is quite a surprising word when you come across it. I was trying to almost get that moment of shock when the bullet is actually located there.
Then I widened the search, traced the scarring back to its source, to a sweating, unexploded mine, buried deep in his mind.
A lot of people who've come back from war have real issues with their temper. Their nerves are shredded. You know, she talks about unexploded minds. I think you could almost say that she's trying to diffuse him. thing I'm very conscious of with this kind of poem is a responsibility to people's lives. I mean, these are real people who've been involved in real conflicts, where people have been injured and died and have killed people as well. There's a sense that you are writing memorials to people.
Then, and only then, did I come close.
When I was a kid, I was in Huddersfield town centre with my mum, and we went into the town hall. On display was an architect's model of what they were going to do to the town in the forthcoming years. I remember the model being incredibly neat and precise. I probably thought it looked like a game, you know, like a train set or a board game where you could drive your little toy cars, or you could move the people around with the throw of a dice. A vision. The future was a beautiful place once. Remember the full-blown balsa-wood town on public display in the Civic Hall? The ring-bound sketches, artists' impressions, blueprints of smoked glass and tubular steel, board game suburbs, modes of transportation like fairground rides or executive toys. Cities like dreams, cantilevered by light. It was the late 60s and the early 70s. There was this very idealistic sense of being able to design the future.
One of the greatest dreams of the 20th century, that dream of an entirely new kind of city.
You know, this was a future made by architects, and like most poets, I try and get the form of a poem to somehow represent or resemble its subject matter. So in this poem, it is very architectural. Each verse is a quatrain, a fairly controlled syllable count going on. It looks orderly and it looks structured. And people like us at the bottle bank next to the cycle path, or dog walking over tended strips of fuzzy felt grass, or model drivers motoring home in electric cars, or after the late show strolling the boulevard. They were the plans, all underwritten in the neat left hand of architects, a true legible script. There's a childlike perspective running through the early parts of the poem, and I think this is reinforced by words like fairground ride and toys, but it's also a poem about growing up. There's a line about halfway through, cities like dreams cantilevered by light. Cantilevered by light. It sounds beautiful. It sounds wonderful, as if this is an architecture made up entirely of light. Well, of course, you know, you look a little bit further into that idea, and you know, light cannot support anything on its own. This is a dream that isn't going to come true. I think the end of the poem, I'm afraid to say, is rather downbeat. This is a landfill site, very smelly and upsetting it is too. All the rubbish that we chuck away ends up here, and it's just left here to rot. At the end of the poem, the speaker in the poem discovers a blueprint or a plan for the future blowing in the rubbish. I pulled that future out of the north wind at the landfill site, stamped with today's date, riding the air with other such futures, all unlived in and now fully extinct. I'm just trying to make the case that you can draw all the diagrams that you want and make all the plans and maps, but people are complicated and messy, and I suppose as you get older, what you realise is that you're actually living in that future now. It's here, it's arrived, and you look around it, and quite a lot of it is junk. Something of a dispiriting poem in that respect, but poems can be gloomy sometimes, and so can I. I just caught the tail end of punk rock when it all kicked off in 1977, and you know, when you're that age, things that are offensive and anarchic are very exciting. But so the poem The Clown Punk is set 25 years later. The speaker in the poem bumps into a punk from that era who's still wearing all the trappings of punk rock, including lots of tattoos. The Clown Punk.
No, exactly.
Driving home through the shonky side of town, 3 times out of 10 you'll see the town clown, like a basket of washing that got up and walked, towing a dog on a rope. But don't laugh. Every pixel of that man's skin is shot through with indelible ink. As he steps out at the traffic lights, think what he'll look like in 30 years' time. A deflated face and shrunken scalp, still daubed with the sad tattoos of high punk. You kids in the back seat who wince and scream when he slathers his daft mush on the windscreen. Remember the clown punk with his dyed brain. Then picture windscreen wipers and let it rain. I think the poem is a very visual poem, especially when it's describing the punk. I've got to ask, was that hurt? Yeah. It's the language of ink and dyes. The word pixel is also used. Now, I think that modernises the speaker. He's kind of entered the digital age, really, whereas, you know, the punk is still trapped in the age of pen and ink. You guys are too young to remember, but I grew up in kind of punk age, and that was the thing then, you know, if you were a punk, you had a tattoo. Would you have a face tattoo?
No, I can laugh that. That'd be that daft.
There is a tradition of this kind of poem in English literature where 2 apparently very different people encounter each other. I might have been thinking a little bit about Shelley's poem Ozymandias, where a carved head is found in a desert, some old ruler of an ancient land, and the person in the poem is explaining how time has passed and left him marooned, an object of a bygone era. I suppose the punk in the poem is a little bit like that. Remember the clown punk with his dyed brain. Then picture windscreen wipers and let it rain. On first reading, you might feel that the clown punk is very much the one with the tattoos and earrings who's out on the street. I think I'm inviting you to wonder whether or not the man in the car might also be a clown punk of some kind, because he's the one who's betrayed his ideals. He's the person who's become separated from the thing that he really believed in. It's interesting to write about homelessness because it's a real visible manifestation of something that's not working properly in society. These are people who've been left behind or people who don't fit in. Give. Of all the public places, dear, to make a scene, I've chosen here. Of all the doorways in the world to choose to sleep, I've chosen yours. I'm on the street, under the stars. For coppers I can dance or sing. For silver, swallow swords, eat fire. For gold, escape from locks and chains. It's not as if I'm holding out for frankincense or myrrh, just change. You give me tea, that's big of you. I'm on my knees, I beg of you. A poem written in the voice of somebody living on the street requires, I think, a certain amount of empathy. You have to put yourself in that person's position. Graham, just want to tell me a bit about what goes on here.
The Muscle Tree, it supports a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, predominantly homeless, who are 2 soup runs a week.
Right.
It feeds up to 70 people a night. I myself was homeless and living on the street for a while. It's terrible because it's almost soul destroying, People just walk past you and don't even look at you. Sometimes it's not even about the money, sometimes it's about somebody just saying hello to you. That can make you feel human again.
Bit of human contact.
Yeah.
It's worth a lot.
Yes, that's worth more than money.
Of all the public places, dear, to make a scene, I've chosen here. Of all the doorways in the world to choose to sleep, I've chosen yours. I'm a big admirer of that kind of poem which has a surface meaning and then another meaning. And in the case of this poem, it's love. It's a love poem. I think that's hinted at in the first line with the use of that word dear. It perhaps suggests a personal relationship. And I think as the poem goes on, you get further signals and hints and clues. For coppers I can dance or sing. For silver, swallow swords, eat fire. For gold, escape from locks and chains. It's not as if I'm holding out for frankincense or myrrh. Just change. There's usually one line in every poem which seems to be flashing on and off, either because it's outrageous or it contains the significance of the poem. I refer to it as the neon line. In this poem, it's that line about holding out for frankincense and myrrh. The speaker in the poem is saying, it's not like I'm trying to be the infant Christ here. All I want is something that you can give me. It's not a miracle that I'm asking for. You give me tea. That's big of you. I'm on my knees. I beg of you. This poem doesn't have a rhyme scheme as such, but there are little rhymes holding it together. Some of them are internal, they don't always happen at the end of the line. And some of them are half rhymes, words like chains and change. It suggests unrequited love, and it reduces the person in the poem to begging. They are begging for love, which is an extraordinarily uncomfortable and insecure place to be. That's the place that the poem is speaking from.
Oh no. Oh no.
"9/11, the 11th of September 2001, became one of those dates of collective consciousness. Everybody who witnessed the attacks on the World Trade Center remembers where they were at that time. The whole Out of the Blue is written from the point of view of an English trader in the North Tower on the day that the planes strike. He's narrating and commentating on the events of the day, but from afterwards. It's a voice from beyond the grave. You have picked me out. Through a distant shot of a building burning, you have noticed now that a white cotton shirt is twirling, turning. In fact, I am waving, waving. Small in the clouds, but waving, waving. Does anyone see a soul worth saving? So when will you come? Do you think you are watching a man shaking crumbs or pegging out washing? I am trying and trying. The heat behind me is bullying, driving, but the white of surrender is not yet flying. I am not at the point of leaving, diving. A bird goes by. The depth is appalling. Appalling that others like me should be windmilling, wheeling, spiraling, falling. Are your eyes believing that here in the gills I am still breathing, but tiring, tiring. Sirens below are wailing, firing. My arm is numb and my nerves are sagging. Do you see me, my love? I am failing, flagging. This is girder sections from the North Tower. This would have come tumbling down under all that weight of the building and has arrived here in the Imperial War Museum North. It's very moving to be standing here in front of it. In the poem I talk about gills of the building, these struts down the building, and that's what I was referring to, and these might well be those sections, because there's also the idea there of gills, you know, a place where you're trying to breathe from. The extract from the poem was written to fit a piece of footage which was taken at the time. The frame of the picture wobbles around and can't always keep the person in the tower in focus. And to try and replicate that a little bit, I use repetition in the poem. So I've tried to get the nature of the poem to resemble the nature of that actual piece of film. In that respect, there's a certain amount of irony in the poem, because the poem is written in a very controlled way, fairly neat stanzas with the same number of lines in each one. And I suppose what I'm trying to do there is to contain the tension, to build up that sense of stress and panic. So in the same way that the lens of the camera finds the man in the building, so the poem focuses on him and describes his situation, and he becomes a metaphor for everyone's terror, everyone's fear, and everyone's heartbreak.